All right, here we are for a special edition of FISMA Friday with the holidays right around the corner. You know, this is a good time for us in the food and beverage industry to start talking about how we can mature our food safety culture. Now, this is a topic that not only impacts food safety and quality folks, but literally everyone who works in and around the food and beverage manufacturing industry. So before we kick things off with the presentation, I'd like to welcome those of you who are new to this series. FISMA Friday began many, many years ago through a partnership with Safety Chain and the Acheson Group to provide some monthly updates, insights, and guidance around changes within the Food Safety Modernization Act. Now, this is your chance to not only learn about some methodologies and tools that can help you consistently meet FISMA requirements, but this is a way for you to engage directly with our food safety experts over at TAG. Just a few housekeeping items here. We have muted all attendee mics, but are absolutely going to leave some room at the end for your questions. So please, during the course of the presentation, just submit your questions in the question panel, and we'll make sure we get to as many as we can before the end of the session. And don't worry if we didn't get to your question, because I will be passing those questions off to our presenters to come back with an answer to you directly. So excellent news there. That's where we get the most value, is getting those questions answered. So yes, this presentation will be recorded. We are recording right now, and we will be sending that recording to you later today along with today's presentation slides. All right, now on to the presentation. I am extremely excited to welcome back to FISMA Friday Dr. Rolando Gonzalez, who had previously joined us for topics such as developing FISMA food defense strategies and how preventative controls for human and food FSVP fit together. These were awesome presentations, and I'm excited to be working with you today. Rolando, just one point to note, on top of Rolando's vast experience in food manufacturing, in 2015, he was part of a group of 35 global companies who worked together in the GFSI Food Safety Culture Technical Working Group to help define what a culture of food safety is and develop a framework that companies can use to improve and mature their food safety culture. So we literally have the expert in food safety culture maturity on with us today. So Rolando, it's great to have you with us.
Great to be back here, Jim, with the FISMA Fridays audience. And yes, looking forward to this topic for today.
Great. Now, I know we have one very big chunky FISMA update that you'd like to share with everybody today, so why don't we dive in?
Absolutely. And the most significant update that as I was preparing for this presentation, that I could find, and I think it would be of interest to the audience, is that FDA has indicated that they will start the comprehensive inspections related to food defense in September of 2024. So we're less than a year away from that now. Many of you may have experienced that they have been doing these quick check inspections, right? For the past 3 years, pretty much in March of 2020. They started those, and that was more like, going into your facility, and as part of different reasons, such as a, preventive controls inspection or routine inspection, they would ask to see if you had a food defense plan in place. And if you said no, they would probably advise that, yep, that was a requirement, and they probably provided some resources for you to look into, but there wasn't really any enforcement in terms of giving you a notice of violation, some sort of 483 or anything for not having a food defense plan in place, or the adequacy of its components. That's going to change. So the agency is preparing for that. They're hiring auditors and inspectors that will be focusing specifically on food defense. So they, when they show up to your facility now, they will give you a couple of 482s. So notice of inspection, sorry, one that has to do with the reason they're there for, the primary reason, and another one specific to food defense. And you will be required to have the elements of that food defense plan in place, which, as you know, includes the vulnerability assessment as the first part. And then, of course, out of that, if you were able to identify any actionable process steps and some mitigation strategies that go along with that, and then the management components in terms of the corrective actions, verification, and so forth, they'll be looking forward to examining that in detail. What they're looking for, obviously, is alignment with what the IA, the intentional adulteration rule from FISMA, requires. So they will be now then very specific about it. And you know, many companies, the Acheson Group has a chance to be on site with companies, hundreds of companies, pretty much on a yearly basis. And we have seen different levels of alignment and preparedness for it. There are some companies who have used different models, and so that's a good start in preparing the food defense plan. But you want to make sure that you're fully aligned with the rule. And again, we have now less than a year to prepare for that. So there is excellent resources out there. There is those from the FSPCA, the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance. There are many courses there. Some of them are actually free. But there is at least one course that needs to be taken with a live instructor, and that is the one pertaining to vulnerability assessments via the 3 fundamental elements and a hybrid method that they have allowed in the rule as well. So our recommendation is make sure that you look into those resources, and that will definitely help you prepare for it. And if you need any help with that, there are groups out there that can help as well, of experts. The Acheson Group is one of them. In fact, we do have 2 lead instructors in the team. One of them be myself, and one of my colleagues who's actually going to be doing a presentation in FISMA Fridays in March, I believe it is, with more details about this. So, so yeah, Jim, that is the most significant update for this month in regards to FISMA.
There's a lot to unpack there, but definitely look into those resources. And what we'll do actually after this presentation is try to, I'll reach out to the folks over at TAG and try to get some links to share with everybody on this call so they can have some quick navigation to some of those resources you just mentioned.
Absolutely.
All right, why don't we get on to how we can mature the food safety culture, and also what types of business benefits can be seen from doing so.
Yeah, and you know, that's a great question, Jim. And you know, one of the common pain points that we find again in working with so many companies, not just here in the U.S. but even overseas as well, is you know, we hear from companies that they have a hard time at times, you know, preparing for audits, for example. And you know, we have audits from a regulatory standpoint. They have audits from certification programs such as GFSI. They have visits from some of their customers who also may have questionnaires or addendums to audits. Some of those have been actually incorporated now into the audit criteria for some of the certification programs from GFSI. But anyways, the reality is that it takes a long time for many companies as they report to prepare for audit, to be audit ready. And you know, we chatted about this, and you know, one of the ways, and actually the primary way in which I think, based on our experience, that companies can better handle that, and that will be one of the benefits of the business, is to be audit ready at all times, right? But then how do you do that? You say, well, yeah, to be audit ready at all times is, yeah, I'm going to be dedicating probably multiple resources to that on a regular basis. And I think that you know, the root of that is within food safety culture, the food safety culture of the company. So if we're able to ensure that we're aligning with the expectations and the requirements of our food safety management system, right? And the food safety programs that are implemented in your facility, not because of the audit, but because we have embraced those as needed, both for regulatory compliance, for obviously satisfying the needs and the expectations of our customers, and also from a business benefit perspective. That's probably the best way to go. And that's, again, in our experience, how many companies have been able to more efficiently be prepared for these audits. And actually, I do have slide here. The next one, and this was a report that was published very recently by FDA, and obviously this is from a regulatory standpoint, but it's actually pretty similar to what I have seen in terms of the outcomes from audits from GFSI, for example, like SQF, BRC, and so forth. And these are kind of the most common violations. In fact, these are violations that from a regulatory standpoint, companies have gotten 483s issued from the FDA. So as you see there, the typical programs, pest controls, so sanitary operations, identifying the proper hazards in the hazard analysis, plant deficiencies in plant construction and design, the frequency of sanitation, right? And the justification for those at times being less frequent than expected. Sanitary operations, again, related to plant sanitation. So a number of deficiencies that um, are typically the ones that we're looking forward to be ready so that we don't get cited in an audit from a negative perspective, but that are programs that should be there and should be functioning and we should be adhering to regularly without, even if we didn't have any audits coming up in a year, just because they ensure the safety and the quality of the food and because they also represent savings to the business. And we'll talk about that a little later here in the discussion. Um, so that's that's one way in which we can tackle that specific pain point that we get very frequently from clients, and that it also has benefits beyond, much beyond that, to be audit ready at all times because we have embraced and we have strengthened the food safety culture of our companies. Uh, so Jim, so another question that we discuss is, so what's a better approach, right, to achieving audit readiness? And that's exactly what I was just discussing here. So not preparing, right, not spending the time only because I need to prepare for the audit, or even driving that message, right? Oh, we're doing all these things. We're making sure that documentation looks okay and complete, and making sure that we're doing the best that we can on the cleaning and sanitation side because we are an audit is coming up, but because we realize that that's important to be in that way at all times. So that's what we propose as the how to be better prepare at all times for those audits. And along with that, then you say, well, how can I strengthen that the culture, right, in my food organization? You mentioned before that I have been fortunate and honored to be part of the GFSI working group, or working table on food safety culture. And like you said, I mean, number of 35 companies from around the world, we worked together for about 3 years, if I remember correctly, starting in 20, back in the late 20s. And the approach and the intent of that working group was to come up for ways to define what do we mean with food safety culture, right? So if I am going to um, look for very specific areas within my operation and within the employees that I can address and that I can better off, so that I can drive that food safety culture forward. So that was the intent of that working group. And there is a report online, and we can provide the link for that one as well. It's free for downloading from GFSI. And we came up with these 5 dimensions of a food safety culture, and we labeled them vision and mission. So pretty self-explanatory, right? In terms of what are the what is the organization aiming to in the context of food safety? The people, I mean, the most important resource that you have in the organization, consistency, making sure that we can not just begin because the audit is coming up, but that we can implement and adhere to those programs and those behaviors on a regular basis. Adaptability, I mean, there is many challenges that are presented to the food manufacturing operations and the food retailers and so forth. And we need to be able to adapt and be able to still be successful in ensuring that food is manufactured in a safe and with good quality. And the last of those five dimensions was hazard and risk awareness. And it's the last but not the least important. We see that many times that's actually a big gap, particularly when it comes to higher management, to leadership, which is in charge, obviously, of making important decisions, including those of assigning resources to maintain food safety and quality. But it's throughout the entire organization. Many times we also go on the floor and we ask people, employees who have the best intentions. We're not questioning that, but who are in charge, let's say, of keeping up a preventive control or a CCP, and they have no idea of why is it that that's important. They just know this, the three steps that they need to follow. Let's say, take a temperature and record it here, but they don't know why that is important. And that is sad, and that makes employees be less willing and less able to react properly when something goes wrong, because it's simply not understanding the why, the purpose of why we do all of that. Um, so understanding what those elements are, right, of a food safety culture, then we can think of, well, how do we then strengthen it? What are the areas when that we need to work on? And it all starts from the top. Typically, because of being food safety, of course, yeah, we think about that being part of the FSQ or FSQA department. They're the ones who need to work on that food safety culture thing, right? That they make sense. But really, that is not the right way to approach it. And again, I think the industry over the years have realized how important it is that there is ownership through the entire organization in regards to food safety. And honestly, when I say food safety, I'm including quality as well. But starting with strong leadership, right? Leaders that show commitment and that lead by example in regards to why food safety culture it's important. Why is food safety important in the organization? Leaders that are accessible and that are willing to talk, as much as they're willing to talk about the business side of things, they're also willing to listen, even if they're not technical people, but they're willing to listen to the needs and the concerns from a food safety and quality standpoint within the organization. Beyond that, of course, you need committed managers, right? So leadership can provide the resources, the commitment, the openness to discuss and frequently talk about food safety, but then we need committed managers that can drive that down the hierarchy to the employees on the lines who are going to be executing, right? And it's also an environment where everyone contributes. Okay, so everyone needs to embrace and believe and make part of that, part of the things that they really champion, that food safety is the responsibility of everybody. It's not just the FSQA people, the employees working in the FSQA office, but it's even, procurement, it's distribution, it's the people in production. Of course, they're fully supporters of the food safety and quality team. So it's everybody. It's even, the person in the front, the receptionist, right? How is she going to receive those inspectors that come from a regulatory standpoint? How aware is she? And even though we're talking about food safety here, but I actually started the conversation talking about an important update on food defense. So how aware is he or she about the potential for intentional adulteration of that food supply? So it's sort of an overall food protection effort, right? That everybody needs to believe in and to help drive. And along the same lines, then an environment where everybody is accountable. Okay, so we drive through efforts to ensure that people are also going to feel accountable for it, and that there will be some consequences if you decide after being empowered with the necessary knowledge and the guidance, of course, and the training, if you still decide that you don't want to support that. That's actually important. And then, we talk about the hazard awareness and all that, but yeah, knowing and acting in the right way. So knowing, yep, there's a responsibility for management to provide that knowledge, and then also employees abiding to, the elements of that food safety management system. And all of this is also in the context of a continual improvement, right? Continuous improvement, which best companies out there want to definitely drive for. So having that mindset, that mentality, it's the way to improve, strengthen the food safety culture in the organization. All of the food manufacturers and retailers and the primary production level, they all have a culture in place, right? It's what we in the way that we look at that is through what we call maturity models, okay? And those maturity models, and there is many of those that have been published out there, and we can provide some references as well. They have multiple different dimensions, just as those GFSI ones that I share with you. And typically, companies are not good in everything at the same time. They might be better in communications, let's say, and they might be better in the people's efforts, right? But when it comes to leadership, well, there might be a gap there, an opportunity there. Or when it comes to the hazard awareness dimension that we talk about, there might still be work to be done along those lines. So typically what we recommend is that there is a baseline taken of where are we today, right? So let's say yep, definitely. It makes it makes sense that this is the way to go and that we need to go to that more fundamental concept of the food safety culture of the organization. So let's take a baseline and see when we're today, because then what we can do is then 6 months, a year down the road, 3 years down the road, we can look back and see what sort of progress have we made and what are still some of the areas that we can work on. And again, it's also not a journey that you achieve overnight. It's pretty much a journey that runs along the existence, the whole existence of the organization. It's something that you continue to develop over time. And there is some challenges associated with that. I'm going to talk about those in a second here. But but we have to see it in that way, right? It's okay if we're not perfect today. It's okay if we have areas where we have to do a lot of work on, and maybe some others that we're pretty good. Comparable to many other organizations out there. And the other thing to say about that is what it's right for one organization may not be exactly what works for a different company, and that's okay too. So that's why we try not to use cookie cutter models, except for that, that overall and general framework that I was talking about that we call maturity models, just to have some structure to the analysis. So, Jim, I will continue here if you are okay with that then.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm taking furious notes here, and I've got a lot of questions myself, but I know you said you're going to be talking about some of the challenges, which is probably a lot of the questions I have right now. So curious to see what you come up with.
Yes, and I will be talking about challenges in a second here. But first of all, I also wanted to talk about what are some of those benefits, right, the business side of the organization can think of from strengthening the food safety culture. And it goes anywhere from capitalizing on pretty much impacting the bottom line. And if we want to land that, I can give you a good number of examples in terms of how, for example, first of all, remember understanding the hazard? So understanding why, if we have equipment that have not been designed with hygienic principles of design in mind, or the facility itself, right? The layout is too crowded, the materials of construction are not appropriate. Let's say the walls are not cleanable, the floor is cracked, several defects, let's say in infrastructure, equipment that cannot be accessed in certain areas, cannot be cleaned effectively, that will result in multiple inefficiencies when it comes to, in the context of the bottom line. So you need more water, you need more chemicals, you need employees who could be doing other tasks. They need to be squeezing water because the floor is not sloped appropriately and therefore water is pooling, which then represents a food safety issue because of that greater accumulation of water. You have inefficiencies related to product flow, and then again, inefficiencies related to the time that the sanitation shift will take. And, in order to get to a state or point where the facility is considered sanitary and there is not going to be any niches left where microbes can grow and or product residues can grow, can remain. Think about allergens, for example, which would also be a food safety issue, but it could also lead to quality issues, right? Residual product that goes into the next batch of product or the next different product that you are using the line for. So there is a plethora of impact to that bottom line. And that's not to mention, less rejected product. Let's say you get through the finished product state, right? And that product goes out into the market. So let's reject a product or product that needs to be placed on hold, product that needs to be reworked or much worse, destroyed at times. How about consumer complaints that you're going to be able to reduce? Again, if you're aligning closely with those, your food safety management system, because the employees understand the why is important of what they need to do and why are those programs that you ask them to follow, why are those programs in place, right? um, Also not to talk about potential negative interactions with the regulatory agencies if they come in and find that, things are not being done in the way that they're supposed to be. That specific example that I was bringing about, how about sanitation has not been able to be done effectively because the equipment is difficult to access or because the facility has so many infrastructure deficiencies that it's pretty much impossible to do a good cleaning. So that means then again, spending extra time, extra resources, and potentially then getting cited negatively by the regulatory agencies. Uh, Not even thinking about recalls, for example, which can be significant, not just from a financial standpoint. And many times you feel, well, from a business standpoint, yeah, we have a concern about financials, obviously, and that's rightly so. But how about the reputation of the company, right? That should be important as well from a business perspective. As in, and reputation, not just in terms of, well, I had a recall, but reputation in terms of, well, you had 3 negative regulatory interactions within the past 3 years or so. As you seek new customers and new clients, they may look at that, and even from an insurance standpoint, they may look at that in a negative way, right? And give you a higher premium from an insurance standpoint, or some other customers requiring either like additional requirements or even disqualifying you at some point. So from a business side perspective, there is so many different benefits that can be drawn from strengthening the food safety culture within the organization. And we started talking about audits, right? Those audits are also going to be definitely better rated for those audits that it's a score what you get, particularly the GFSI certification program, so third-party audits. So definitely multiple benefits from a business standpoint. Now, uh, that, as I said, at some point does not come without challenges. Okay, and again, having been not just not with the Acheson Group and some of the other companies, visiting companies, but having been a fiscal manager at some point and a director of operations, I did experience myself a good number of challenges when we were trying to strengthen the food safety culture of the organization. and actually seeking alignment with our food safety management system. And, there are things that could be a little more outside of your control. For example, the size of the organization. Okay, so we understand, smaller organizations may have limited resources, right? Definitely not being able to compare them to one of the larger multinational companies out there. How about staff turnover? And, in certain food platforms, that is higher than in others. And in certain geographic regions of the country, that is, again, higher than in other areas. But even then, you have to work around that, right? And try to address, again, the fundamental opportunity that we have here to have people embrace the importance of, and again, the why. Why do we care? I mean, why do we spend this much time and resources talking about it? Some of the other things that in my experience, some of the challenges, those are more over our control and are things that we need to watch out for, right? So making sure that food safety culture is not like the topic of the month, right? And sometimes, we get excited about it and we say, hey, yeah, we're gonna assign a number of people to work on this. Watch out for just those people just being within the fiscal office or department. But then, this month, yep, great effort and all of that. As time goes by and other priorities come up, then that kind of gets put in the back burner, right? So that's one of the challenges that I find. And if we do that, and we do that, and I'm not saying that we do that arbitrarily. I clearly mentioned there are many other competing priorities that are there in a food handling operation. But making sure we don't fall into that trap. Sometimes we do rely a lot on having great programs in place on paper, right? What I was calling the food safety management system or the organization. And sure, we get driven by whatever SQF or BRC or one of the other FSSC 22000 and even the regulatory expectations. And we are just entirely focused on making sure that we are fully aligned with them. But then we forget to include and make sure that the employees know, again, what I was saying, the why. Why is it that we're doing that? Why is it that they're asking for so many things? Yeah, why don't we just check the box and that's it, right? If we have it, we have a program. Yeah, we have a HACCP program. Okay. We have an environmental monitoring program. Yep, we do. Check the box. But they're not really understanding the why is it that we do that. So when that happens, then employees again are less willing to engage. They do things simply because, well, the boss said that I need to do these three things, and that's, it's higher risk. It's a weaker signs of a not so strong culture yet, where they're committed and they are by themselves. And even if you're not there, because management cannot be around at all times, there should be some oversight, of course, on the floor at all times. But even if management is not there, they're like, nope, I'm doing this because I know how important that is. And I know that that food that we put out there, we have a big responsibility to make sure that people are not going to get sick. Even my family is going to consume that food, and myself, I am going to be eating that food. So I want to make sure it's safe, and I'm going to do the right thing because I'm convinced myself, not because my boss said that I had to do this. Um, Another thing that is common, and again, I'm not criticizing any of this, I'm just putting it out there on the table. Prioritization of cost savings or production, right? And yes, there is many times where we have to control cost, absolutely, at all times, actually, not many times, at all times. But we got to make sure that that cost control doesn't always come from the food safety programs, right? And the measures that we put in place to ensure food safety and quality. And if it does, that we do that in a balanced way and without affecting the effectiveness of those programs, particularly those that are the most critical, right? So it's the preventive controls and the CCPs, but not forgetting the prerequisite programs. Um, because in fact, many times the issues that we see with product recalls and outbreaks of disease and all of that, and then companies getting a bad hit on the reputation and financially, they're not dealing with the CCPs and the preventive controls. It's mostly on the prerequisite programs that there are drifts and deviations. And then one last challenge that I want to mention that again, I've come across very frequently. We tend to become too optimistic, right? And we call it the Acheson group optimistic bias. Well, we've been operating for 50 years and we haven't had a problem. So that should be an indication that everything is cool and there is nothing different that we need to do. Um, and then, we're proud of what we do and we feel that we're the best out there. So we have to do very little regarding food safety culture. We're already there. And as I said before, this is not something that you arrive at overnight. This is something, it's a journey, right? And it's a journey that over time will result in many benefits. Some of them more, sooner than others. Some of the things are long term, and actually changing the mindset and the mentality of people. It's not something that you do overnight. It's something that you have to do with repeated talking frequently about food safety. Like I said, at some point, leadership showing and leading by example that food safety is at the forefront of the principles of the organization. Um, Even the environment and thinking about the environment in which they work on, right? Is there a clear indication that, let's say, food foamers and hygienic barriers and the PPE that employees use to ensure that they don't carry contamination from an area of higher risk, sorry, an area of lower risk to an area of higher risk? Do all of those things reflect that food safety is a priority in this organization, or do they reflect that it's kind of an afterthought, right? Something that, yep, we know we have to have it, so but it's really not as important. Are resources devoted enough so that employees understand that strong message that gets sent throughout the organization in regards to the importance of food safety for that company? That will all give them a clue in terms of, yeah, this is important, or this is not as important for this company, so I'm not gonna care as much. And obviously, I mean, I mentioned the thing about the why, so that means training, right? Frequent training about it. How much time do we spend and with what frequency addressing food safety topics from a training perspective, or from looking at near misses, right? So all of that, it's not just one single item that can help you drive and strengthen the food safety culture within the organization, but more so a collection of it's living that culture, and that's why we use the term culture. Sometimes we use the term climate because when I say, for example, let's take the temperature at this point and let's do a baseline, right? Take a baseline. So that's more like the climate. Okay, how are we doing today? But when we say culture, then we're thinking about what are those principles that are the long term really committed within the organization. Today, we might not be as strong in this particular area of those 5 dimensions, but we're aiming to get there and we'll put in the necessary resources. Also, in that case, absolutely that is the culture of the organization. So, anyways, it is I'm pretty sure you've seen a number of webinars and a number of talks in different conferences and all of that. Um, we at the Acheson Group have developed based on published literature, so with the necessary scientific rigor as well, have developed a maturity model that draws from all of those that have been published out there. And we also have a survey tool that we use at different levels throughout the organization. And sometimes those are administered remotely, sometimes they're administered in person, and that may include interviews with people. So it's a collection of different tools that we use to help companies evaluate the food safety culture within the organization, from the baseline up to more advanced stages of culture. And it's always very satisfying to see how that progress is made and how the business, particularly the business side of the organization, realizes, even though at some point they might be a little skeptical about that being a little too fluffy or a little too, poetic, how in the end they actually are able to see those benefits coming through, and impacting pretty much a bottom line in the end. Um, so that's those are some of the challenges and some of the ways to address those as well. So, Jim, yeah, I talk a lot here, so I am happy to entertain some questions and some specific areas
Absolutely.
people would want to hear a little more about.
Yeah, Rolando, this is great. I didn't want to disrupt your flow because I think there was a great story that you were telling here. And, when it comes down to it, I think a lot of people might be feeling a little overwhelmed, right? Everybody knows that food safety culture is important. Everybody, like you just said, has probably attended a webinar or had consumed some type of information around how to better your food safety culture, but it's just a lot. There's a lot to consider. And like you said, there's, under the challenges list, optimistic bias, other competing priorities. These are daily things that just happen. And it's not just for food safety, it's every department is dealing with
Yeah,
this. I think you
yeah,
mentioned earlier, right? Every department has its own set of practices, processes, boxes that they have to check, and their own culture. So,
right.
how do you influence these departments? Obviously, as you said, it has to come from leadership, but how do you make sure that food safety is not just another box to check, that it is literally ingrained in every single worker at that facility? It's not an easy thing to do. We're all human beings, right? And even in our day to day, we like to think that we're experts at what we do. But how can you tell me if I'm not in food safety that I also need to care deeply about food safety, even though I'm over in accounting or I'm,
Hmm.
the guy in the forklift over, it's just a tough thing to handle. So I'd be really interested to see how you or others maybe at TAG have addressed that situation in trying to get, and I know you said it comes down to the why, but how do
Yeah.
you make sure that people are truly living that spirit of food safety?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Jim. And and I also have to say, there aren't many things that are black and white in a wicked problem like this, right? Or an aim like this. So it is a combination of things. I start with making sure that it's not about scaring anybody, or it's not about making sure that people, it's about, for example, studying some of the examples of what's happened out there, right, to other companies or in the industry as a whole, so in general. What are some of the big outbreaks and recalls that have happened, and utilizing that as examples with the
Mm,
specifics, obviously, to let them know, hey, here were all the gaps that honestly, if you were just to task the food safety and quality department to address those, it would not be possible for no single department to address
mm,
those. And
right.
then also making sure that they understand, it's in the end, right, the food that what customers and clients see out there, they are not gonna think, oh, that was the food safety department, oh no, that was the accountant. That was,
Right.
the food represents that is the product that represents the organization, and the impact, the negative impact to that organization, can be widespread. Regardless, it could result in some companies have not been able to survive some of the big outbreaks where people have died, and there've been big
Right.
recalls and all of that. So that jeopardizes not the job of me as an employee of the food safety and quality department, but pretty much everybody throughout the organization. And then empowering them with that discussion about the hazards, right? Here's the different hazards that can be that are related to whichever food is it that we're manufacturing, and in the way that that food is consumed and so forth. So we all have the opportunity to contribute to a product that is a good quality, and in that case includes safety, and that we can be proud of. And normally, when you make people aware of something where they can play a role, a positive role, and make a difference, people will be willing to support that and to really align and champion it. When you do the opposite, though, when it seems like it's something just pertaining to the fiscal department, then people are like, oh yeah, I had nothing to do with that. I don't know. I
Mm,
mean, that's only their responsibility. And so it does require a lot of from a managerial standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, driving that message, and the rest of the employees outside of the food safety and quality office seeing that, seeing how the company embraces it and puts the necessary resources into it, that drives a strong
mhm.
message across the organization that is convincing. That is, most of the time, I would say, draws people into, okay, yeah, I want to be part of that initiative. I mean, that's a good
Right.
thing, right? And
There,
you know, I use the word initiative, but remember, I also said don't make it the topic of the month only,
right.
but make it something that we live by, right? So yeah,
No,
it's not a
I
one
love that.
single
It,
answer, but yeah,
yeah, absolutely. You're creating almost evangelists for this initiative, and it's an
exactly.
ongoing thing. Um, yeah. So, just out of curiosity, I know you mentioned TAG has a maturity model and a survey, and you had
Yeah,
mentioned, look, it's important to take sort of these periodic benchmarks to
yes,
try to gauge where you are in your food safety maturity. Now, we also know that this is a continuous thing. It never ends, as you called it, a journey.
right,
So it's not just a step by step, and then you reach the end of your level, and woohoo, we celebrate. Like this thing
right,
goes on forever. So I guess
right.
this is a silly question, but how do you know that you have a quote unquote mature food safety culture?
Yeah, no, that great question as well. So it is I'm going to start by actually addressing part of the comments that you made as part of the question. Definitely not celebrating like, oh, here we are, we're done. We arrived at a mature, totally mature food safety culture, nothing else to do. But it's important to celebrate small achievements that we have, right? Such as, hey, just as we keep metrics for employee safety, right, for health and safety, or metrics for production goals that we met, how about if we keep goals as well for food safety topics? Right? And we celebrate when hey, look at it. We saw a reduction in rejected product. What I'm just making up stuff here. Or we saw a reduction in the number of positive microbiology swabs that we got in the environment because we enhanced our cleaning and sanitation SSOPs and so forth. Let's celebrate those small achievements too because as I said, and you will, reinforce, it is not something that we arrive at overnight. So it's something that we will work on continuously, right? As part of the principles of the organization. And how do I know if I have a strong, mature culture? Well, one thing to remember, which I mentioned as well, is we're not going to get there necessarily in all aspects of the culture at the same
Right.
time, right? So we
Yep.
might lag behind in certain areas and we might be more advanced in others. But that's where those maturity models come in handy because they kind of provide the granularity, right? For you to look at how are we doing in communications? How are we doing in hazard awareness? How is, the role of leadership showing up? And what sort of impact it's having. And those maturity models, then they have different levels, right? So let's say, using data that we collect, let's say that criteria item. So using the data that we collect as part of daily operations. Is it an organization that just collects it there in files or binders or whatever, electronically or hard copy, and that's it? Or on the other extreme, is it an organization that looks at that data on a regular basis and
Right.
tries to determine what sort of patterns and trends, if any, is that data suggesting? And based on that, they make decisions that impact the whole operation. So that's kind of the
Right.
extremes, right, of maturity. And in between, you have different levels. You start being very skeptical about things, and then you start, okay, well, let's look at a few programs. And within the Food Safety and Quality Office, we're going to deal with those. And then eventually it goes from out of there and it grows into, well, now Food Safety and Quality is collaborating with production. and production is making certain changes based on the data that we get in food safety, some improvements. Okay, that's even better. And then you keep improving from there until the changes are,
Mm.
organization or enterprise wide. So that's, that's the way. And honestly, how do you know that you are getting better? You're gonna start seeing that in terms of, like I was saying, some of those benefits for the business, less rejected product, less consumer
Right.
complaints, all of those different indicators. Some of them are leading, some of them are lagging indicators. But you're going to
Right.
start seeing it
Right.
for sure.
I
I can
wonder if
guarantee
that's one of the challenges, though, is able to track that. And you can say, okay, well, there's been a decrease in customer complaints. Well, I'm sure there's probably 100 different things that could have maybe contributed to that. How do you know that you can pinpoint it to improvements on the food safety side?
yes, and that is and also a very great question. And it's you have to pay close attention at that data. And that's what we're saying, data analysis and trending.
Just be
Uh,
very, yeah, yeah.
Right, detail. So it's not going to be a summary. Well, we got, instead of 500, we got 25 complaints this year. Well, let's look close and see from those 500, how many were related to food safety or quality. And then from the 25, let's see. Maybe the 25 are still the ones that we had originally, so we haven't really made any progress. But what I want to illustrate with that very simple example is we have to be detailed about it. We really have to put the effort into trending and analyzing that data to determine what is it telling us, and then using that information to act on it, not just summarize it for a leadership meeting at the end of the month, and that's it. That's where it stays.
Mm, hmm.
Yeah. So
This brings up another topic, and I don't know that I want to go into this rabbit hole, but I still think it important. You started this presentation by talking about becoming audit ready all the time,
yes,
and at least here at Safety Chain, we hear the stories a lot where if you're doing paper-based processes, you're calculating things, using spreadsheets. That sometimes can be slow. Sometimes records are incorrect because they were inputted incorrectly. Sometimes you might even be using a form that's out of date. There's many different things that could help, I guess, you fail in audit
yes.
if you're using, we'll just say, more manual process or paper-based processes. Would you say that that's one of the primary challenges around some of the food safety risk areas? Is that you haven't necessarily digitized, or you haven't had the ability to visualize what's going on in your plant from FSQA down to the end of production in order to make those changes, in order to see areas for improvement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I mentioned some of the typical areas where problems are seen, and those are all preventable and addressable, right? And I mentioned it from a regulatory standpoint, citing the recent report from FDA. And I also said that those are typical deficiencies, and that we see in third-party audits, such as the GFSI ones. But um, the formatting and stuff, particularly when it comes to the GFSI certification audits, that is at times a reason, yes, for failing an audit. Much less now, because I guess people have become familiar with the different requirements from the different certification programs like SQF, BRC, and stuff. That does take a little time. I will agree with that, and but once you really have managed the important items, the critical items that are pertaining to your food safety management system, then the formatting itself, that's gonna be just follow, copy, and follow it. Don't
Right.
fight it. Just do whatever the hierarchy of items they need, and the 1.123, and the that's. But the second part of that question in regards to leveraging technology. Technology definitely plays a big role, an important role in facilitating many of these tasks, right? And some of automating some of them, or making sure that they do not get missed. For example, many of these systems that now, employees on the floor, they have a tablet, and the tablet, the system, and I'm not going to mention any particular providers, but the
Right.
system is guiding them through, the items that need to be collected and recorded and checked.
Yes.
So that's one point where, again, in complying with our monitoring requirements within our food safety or hazard plan, that's going to help tremendously and make it more efficient than if we're have a collection of hard copies on the floor and
Right.
and get missed, but nobody noticed, and they inspect. Sure, there should be a
Right.
reviewer at the end of that, but still got missed. So technology definitely plays an important role, and we highly recommend leveraging technology to the extent possible.
Yeah, again, it just comes down to you can't manage what you can't see. You can't
Correct.
improve if you have no idea that improvement's needed. And it's funny because you were talking about those 483 top offenses and, equipment maintenance. Well, how would somebody in FSQA know if there's a equipment issue, right? That's somebody else's department. But if you
Right.
have the visibility that is kind of tracking everything on the plant floor, then you kind of know, oh, there might be an issue over here. And
Exactly.
you can pick up that phone a lot faster, walk down, down the line and tell somebody. Um,
Absolutely. And and the other thing, Jim, is again, when you have driven that message and people have embraced that they all play a role in the organization, then in the organization in supporting food safety, then
mhm,
you break some of those silos, right? As you
exactly.
were
Yeah.
just mentioning now, where you say, well, that's a different department. I had nothing to do with that. No, I actually do have something to do with it because I know that that's going to have an impact into what they do or what they are able or not able to accomplish.
Right.
Um,
Right. I have
and
one question here. This kind of goes back to either the first or second question. Um, but as you were talking, it kind of I get it. Everybody needs to understand why this is important, but I think there's many folks that don't know how they can contribute. They might believe, yes, this is important, but how do I contribute if I'm not in food safety, right? If I'm
mm,
the accountant or the forklift driver, it's
yeah,
it's trying to kind of map the benefits over to the specific role. Is that something that you at TAG help with, or is there
yes.
other methodologies that you can recommend?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's something that we help with in terms of optimizing, right? The resources that you have, be them limited or be extensive, and also helping the company identify how others can support the food safety roles throughout the organization and the goals, right? That we have, the outcomes that we have that we're aiming for. And something that comes to
Right.
mind very like right off the top of my head, the accountant. We have in many companies, and it's a good idea to have internal inspection programs. So the internal inspection, the walkthrough, let's say a GMP audit or a regular audit that looks at many more things than just GMPs, should not be
Hmm.
just conducted by the FSQA personnel, right?
Right.
The same two people always going around with the same four people. No, bring somebody, bring the HR person, bring the accountant who's not used to looking at things on the floor. Why? Because those of you who are on the floor, and I experience the same thing, we can get used to things very quickly and do not even realize that there's a problem. Now, somebody coming from the outside may not know all the technicalities or the pieces of equipment that are there, but they might know enough to question, and it may actually raise a question on them. Is that right? I saw that you guys, or I saw that this is in that state. Is that okay? And just with that, that is a key observation that may point out to a significant deficiency that needs to be corrected. And none of the FSQA people saw it because they're so used to it that and that's just human nature. So that's one way that came just right off the top of my head. How can you involve other people within the organization and give them a chance to contribute to food safety?
Yes, exactly. All right. I'm going to ask one more question here because I know we're out of time, but I know you mentioned that you were head of production at one point in your career. And
Yes.
this is one of those silly, maybe it's like a classic interview question or something, but if you can go back in time and tell yourself something around food safety, what would that advice be as a head of operations?
Yeah. So that would be more of making sure that I realize that they might feel like a pest at times, right? Like, oh,
Mm,
you can't do that. You can't, let me take this measure. You can't proceed. The line cannot start and stuff.
right.
But it would be more like, let's actually listen to them. I know that, like we said before, each department has their own goals that they need to meet, but they're all good goals, right? I'm not saying that the production goals are not good. Similarly, the FSQA goals are not good. They are both in support of the business, in making sure the business can flourish and grow even more every day. So what I would taught myself is to be a little more open to collaborating with them rather than seeing them as a competition or a challenge that I need to get out of the way.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect. All
Yep.
right, Ronaldo, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for hanging out. I know we're getting a little bit over time. Just as a reminder, we will be sending this recording and presentation out to you later, along with some additional resources that Rolando had brought up, including some additional resources around that new food defense plan preparation that we started this presentation with. So thanks for joining us, everybody. I hope if you're in the United States, you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We definitely look forward to seeing you on the next FISMA Friday. Rolando, please come back. I love this conversation, and I definitely know there's going to be more to talk about. So we'll talk offline. But thank you so much, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Will do. Always a pleasure. You too.
Take care, all.